My friends and I are avid backpackers, and we love traveling all around to explore the wilderness. But one of our favorite places to experience nature is Columbus's own Highbanks Metro Park. At Highbanks, there are a variety of activities to do, and a great deal of things to experience. Even to those who frequent the park, there's always something to discover and plenty of new things to learn. One of the first things you'll see upon entering the park is its impressive nature center, built in the mid-90s but recently renovated with new and exciting displays. Here, you can learn all about the park and really gain an appreciation of the various things that Highbanks has to offer. But even better is to get out onto the trails to experience them for yourselves.
So as a kid, I loved to escape here, just go on hikes and things like that. But one thing I never really noticed until later in life was just how much biodiversity there is, how much wildlife there is. And even still, every time I come here, I find that there's a lot of things that I don't notice when I'm just hiking down the trail.
At the edges of the park, you see non-native plants brought in from the urban areas surrounding the park.
As beautiful as these are, this is honeysuckle, an invasive plant, which is why you see them everywhere. The berries look really good, but you shouldn't eat them, although you can eat the flowers.
There are also ample opportunities throughout the park to find wild mushrooms on a wet autumn day like today.
So this looks like there should be lots of mushrooms here.
Yeah, that was my hope because, see, there's all these dead, rotting logs, which is perfect for mushrooms to grow on, and it's sort of a moist day. So I'm surprised we're not seeing anything. I'm sure, though, we can find something if we just remain observant, which is often the key to this sort of thing. Down here we've got really bright orange and really beautiful eyelash cup fungi. If you look really closely, you'll notice some tiny strands around the edge of the fungal body. Another thing you'll often notice on rotting logs are these long, sort of black spiderweb-like things. And it might be a little freaky, but it's actually just the mycelium, or the roots of a fungus, that's sort of banded together with other roots to form this long, ropey substance. And the purpose of this is so that the fungi can travel long distances, or grow in long distances rather, so that it can find places that are more nutrient-rich. Oh, look what we have here. These nice little round, rotund, plump, adorable mushrooms are called puffballs, a name as fittingly adorable as how they look. And these are actually an edible mushroom. Now there's a few things that look alike that you don't want to eat, but the way you know this is something you can cook and eat is that you want to slice it in half and make sure the inside is pure white. Now sometimes in the later fall and winter you'll find old desiccated ones on some rotting logs, and if you see those you can smack them a bunch and this cloud of spory smoke will come out. It's really fun to do. So now that we're closer to the river, there's a lot of trees like sycamore, which has the white bark over there, some hackberry, which has this really bumpy, warty looking bark. There's also some buckeyes growing in the area, but I'm more interested in what's growing on the dead buckeye. This is dryad saddle, also called pheasant back, because you can see it's got these feathery sort of patterns. And on the other side are these beautiful pores. If you smell it, it's got a really good smell. I'll have Robby tell you what he thinks it is in a second. But these are really good for cooking. They kind of remind me of portobellas. You gotta cook them pretty well, but they're delicious.
Oh, you know what it smells like? Well, it smells a little like watermelon. Yeah, it's weird.
Watermelon rind, kind of.
Like a hint of cucumber as well.
That's the way you know that you've got the right thing, though, is that watermelon smell.
One tree you'll often find on this riverside trail is this American bladdernut. You can see where it gets the name. The fruits are these papery, sort of Chinese lantern looking things. There are a few non-native trees that have a similar sort of lantern structure that contain these seeds, but this one is the American bladdernut, so it's native.
And not far from here was one of Ohio's most wonderful fruiting trees.
So all of these really big leaved trees belong to one of my favorite trees, the pawpaw. If you don't know what a pawpaw is, it's this wonderful native fruit that's sort of like a combination between a banana and a mango. Now there's none here. They've either been picked clean or dropped. Not only does it have wonderful fruits, the bark is actually really flexible, so you can use it to sort of tie things together, you know, to make shelter with or something like that. There's not a lot of them, and they usually grow only to this small height because they like the shade, so it's best not to hurt them.
Also nearby were some trees that produced edible nuts which, on this autumn day, had fallen to the ground.
These are black walnuts, the nut of a walnut tree, which actually you can see growing over there. But
Can you eat these, or do you need to do something special to them?
no, you can. You just have to make sure you find them at the right stage, and they're really hard to crack open, actually. Squirrels are pretty good at it, but humans not so much.
Wait, so squirrels can crack that open?
Yeah, with their teeth.
Wow, that's incredible.
You can actually use the husk to like make a sort of dark brown or black dye too. If you take the really young ones, maybe in the spring or early summer, you can pickle them, and just the whole husk and everything, and put them in a jar, pickle them, and eat them.
And there are also trees that might give you a fright if you didn't know any better. How much money would I have to pay you for you to rub this all over your face?
A lot of money. I don't even know what it is.
No, look at it. You know what it is, right?
Oh, is it poison ivy?
Actually, it's not. This is a tree called box elder, and they've got these compound leaves which sometimes look like poison ivy. What gives it away is that the branches grow oppositely of each other, meaning they both come from the same area.
See, I thought you were gonna say that these were like some type of horrible fungus.
Oh, no.
So, I've been trying to learn some of the trees, Andrew, and I'm pretty sure that one is a maple, right?
Nope, that's a red oak.
Oh, well, that one's a maple, right?
Nope, shagbark hickory.
Okay, well, that one over there has got to be an
Elm.
That's what I was gonna say. You didn't let me finish.
I don't know. I don't think there's any maples in this area.
Further ahead was another nut-bearing tree growing along the stream.
This is actually from a tree related to the walnuts, and this is a hickory. Specifically the husk of the hickory. The nut is somewhere else, probably something got it.
So these are a lot easier to break.
Yeah, well the husk is actually always going to be decently easy, although these do split apart like more naturally. And I've actually eaten the nuts inside, and when you crack them open, it's kind of like walnuts, which I guess makes sense. But sometimes you get one that's a little old and there's a weevil grub inside, but they still taste pretty good, the grubs.
When you learn about the forest biodiversity, you can appreciate the park in a completely new way. But along with its natural riches, Highbanks has relics from some of its earlier human inhabitants. At the Nature Center, you'll find examples of artifacts and stone tools that the Adena created thousands of years ago. And outside, you can still find ancient burial mounds and earthworks throughout the park. One of those mounds is found in one of Highbanks' vast open meadows. We visited the mound in person and talked about the Adena who created it.
I know that they are Paleo-Indians who lived in this area, and I believe it's a burial mound with some artifacts inside. So what you're seeing now is actually a mound that they've sort of reconstructed somewhat.
Oh, so the original height was 6 to 7 feet, and then it went down.
To get some more information about the Adena people, we talked with Jill Snyder, one of the naturalists at the park.
The Adena lived here 1000 BC. They were one of the first groups to really start to settle. They did some squash, some corn, some different crops that they would make. And so then they would do the burial mounds as their way of kind of preserving things. And normally what they would do is they would start with whoever you're burying plus your, a couple of their important items. So a hammer or a hatchet or, some pots, some jewelry. And then they would actually put wood around it and burn it and make a funeral pyre and let that kind of burn. They'd cover that with dirt. That's where you get the mound. And then the next time someone died, they'd put them in that same spot, do the same thing, burn it, and it would just slowly get larger the more people that they kind of added to it. The one mound here has never fully been excavated. We did enough that we know the culture and got some of the artifacts out of it, but it's left mostly intact.
The Adena mound, along with the diverse plant life of the meadow, stay preserved thanks to the park. But still, modern civilization bustles all around the park, and with it comes invasive species.
Okay, this is another introduced plant. It's called autumn olive. If you actually look at the underside of the leaves, it looks like someone's painted it with some sort of like silver coating.
Oh, wow.
See how shimmery it is?
That's really cool. Holy crap.
But these fruits are edible, but you're gonna wanna find one that's a little more shriveled up because otherwise they're kind of astringent.
Now, how much nutritional value do these actually have?
It's a good question.
Edible's one thing.
See,
Yeah.
they make your mouth really dry if they're not shriveled up enough.
Yeah.
But they taste good, right?
They do taste good.
That's really weird. It's like when you eat apple peels.
Yeah, yeah.
They do taste good. That's really surprising.
One of my favorite ways to connect with and learn more about our prehistoric ancestors is to try and reenact the process of creating stone tools, albeit with some more modern materials.
So to demonstrate how people turn flint into an arrowhead, I'm going to be using this glass bottle, which is actually easier to work, but it's also more commonly found throughout the world. To break the bottom of the glass bottle, which is the piece we'll be working on, we're going to use this screw. We've got 2 pieces of deer antler to actually flake pieces off of our glass and shape it into an arrowhead. And we've got leather to hold the glass and protect our hands. We've got a hammerstone to sort of work at the glass. And finally, a trash bag to catch all of the fragments and things so that they don't get scattered all over the ground. So to break this bottom piece off of the bottle, I'm just gonna drop this screw in here, cover the top with my thumb, and just sort of shake it. There, clean break. Now what you're looking for is an edge that's sort of sharper to get started. This actually took some of the side of the bottle off. So I'm gonna try to use my hammerstone to sort of clean this edge up so that I can work with it. Sometimes your glass will break in half anytime during the process, really, in which case you just make a smaller arrowhead. The problem with this is the edge is really flat, and again, you want a sharper sort of pointed edge to work with using the antler. So I'll just have to keep cleaning it up. So what you're looking for is this sort of edge of the glass. And what you do is you use this antler to apply pressure into the edge. And then since it's below, as you apply pressure, you want to push it down somewhat. So you want to push it in and then below, pop a flake out, and then keep going until it's sort of even throughout.
So this is the bottom. This side is the top.
Yeah.
And you want this edge to be right in the center.
Yes. So
Those two.
you apply pressure down as you're pushing in it, and that the pressure pushes a flake off the bottom of it
Got it.
and brings the edge to the center. Sometimes if the edge of the glass is too fine, you want to go in with this hammerstone and sort of scrape some of the finer bits off. And what that does is it makes the edge stronger so that when you actually push a flake off, it won't just crumble little pieces off. It'll actually take a significant piece off.
Oops.
Working with tools like these can be a slow and rough process, but it's also incredibly engrossing and rewarding. Some time had passed, and the glass was beginning to look a little more like an arrowhead.
So sometimes you've got this sort of flat edge that you can't really do anything with. And what you want is a sharper edge like here, so that you can actually push flakes off of it. To get this flat edge workable, you want to push a flake in the direction of the edge. And then you just sort of keep working back and forth, extending this sharp edge along the flat edge until the whole thing becomes workable. So after a bit of work, got this rough arrowhead shape. In the interest of time, I'll leave it at this, but you'd want to chip in some notches here or maybe down here so that you can more securely tie it to the shaft of an arrow. But that is more or less how you nap flint.
For more child-friendly activities, the park also has green spaces for families and kids to play in. Here, at the edge of these woods, is a natural play area, where children can use sticks and logs to construct shelters and interact with nature directly. We decided to try our hands at building a basic lean-to shelter.
Okay, so we don't have quite as many materials available to us as we might in the middle of some forest when we're lost. But there's all these logs for kids and some adults to play with.
I really like to just be outside. I like to be dirty and be experiencing it as much as I can. So, like I said, as a kid, I played in the creek all the time. I loved being out there, turning over rocks, looking for things, that exploring part. So now I like to do it out in the woods here. I like to be able to turn over rocks, turn over logs. So there's always something new to learn and explore and find. And I think that's the other thing that I've always really enjoyed doing, is just seeing what else is out there.
But I'm gonna use this one actually. Actually, I got it. Oops. And as a brace in the forest, you can usually find sticks that are Y-shaped, preferably with one main trunk and then a branch coming off so you can hammer it into the ground. On top of that, we can put smaller pieces. Okay, so after we put all these big pieces on, I'm gonna look for smaller, thinner pieces of wood to stick in between all these little gaps. And then even on top of that, even smaller sticks to put on that. And what that does is it makes a bunch of layers and things that we can finally dump a bunch of dead leaves on top of.
In the natural play area, you can also wander off trail through the woods. We collected some sticks to create a sort of rough lattice on our shelter. Next, we gathered fallen leaves to waterproof and insulate the shelter. And around this time of year, there were plenty of those all over the ground.
No, what you want to do is you want to start from the bottom and then go up. And that way it sort of creates layers, like if you think about how shingles overlap.
Oh, yep.
So then when water pours down. And of course, in an actual deciduous forest, you'd have way more material to work with. If you were really going to be using this, you'd want about, like, I don't know, 50 more bags of these. Because you want to pile it on thick for warmth and insulation. Best leaves to use in a deciduous forest are beech leaves. Now those drop later in the fall, and those have a compound in them that kind of repels insects. So. And like I said, you'd want a lot more bags of this so you can pile it on all across this shelter, and so that you can pile it on thicker to keep warmth in.
We left part of the shelter bare to show the difference that even a small amount of leaves can make, and then gave it a little test.
So this is almost suitable for 3 people.
I suppose if, like, obviously in like a survival situation, if you're all lying under here, you know, it'd be pretty decent.
You'd want to make it a little bigger. We also only finished half of the roof. But
This thatching's really good. You can't see through there at all.
yeah, it's not home till you got leaves on your roof.
I was gonna test it and jump on the top, but I thought about the ramifications if it actually isn't sturdy enough.
Sturdy enough to support some
Yeah.
sticks and leaves.
You're not making a bed, you're making a roof.
Children who get to interact directly with nature end up growing happier and with a greater appreciation of the environment. And it's thanks to places like Highbanks that they can still have these experiences. One of the first things you'll notice at the Nature Center is a model of a giant sycamore tree. And to the west of the Olentangy River, in Highbanks' newly opened River Bluff area, you can find the real deal. When we visited the tree, we had to wander through some thick understory of plants. Before long, we were at the tree, whose massive trunk was in itself a miniature ecosystem, with moss, herbaceous plants, fungi, and all sorts of insects and spiders. As we admired the tree, we also admired the life that it supported, like this orb weaver spider.
It's weird to think that this is the largest sycamore and it's just like in Ohio, central Ohio.
where everyone thinks everything is boring.
It's been amazing since we've renovated the Nature Center and we've added the giant sycamore tree. I think that's one of those pieces that, you know, people just don't appreciate the fact that we do have all of these big, old trees here. I mean, none of this is old growth forest. I mean, it's all been farmed or logged, but we do have the largest sycamore tree in the nation. And that it's still here, it's still alive, it's still growing.
We were also fortunate enough to get to see the River Bluff area before it opened, thanks to a tour from Jill.
You lose the perspective because we're up high here. Right. But if we go down this hill, you'll see the big shale bluffs. And so the way the park actually formed is that one of the founding fathers of Metro Parks, they were walking on this side of the river and saw the high banks and the bluffs and were like, we need to preserve that area. We want to protect this view. And so initially they wanted to protect this side so that you could see that side. But it ended up being that side was easier to buy property. And we have some pictures from that overlook deck spot of them kind of standing and pointing this way. And it is all wide open field as far as you can see. There's not a tree. It's amazing, 45 years later, how much plants, trees, fields have actually grown up. We always think it's the opposite.
Next, Jill took us down the hill, closer to the river, where a grove of new growth sycamore trees grew high. The soft, warm glow of the sunlight through their leaves gave the woods an absolutely magical feeling. Once we reached the river, we could see a bald eagle in the distance, perched on a tree. While we watched it, Jill recounted a story of one of her earlier encounters with the bald eagle during a guided hike.
And all of a sudden the bald eagle flew overhead. It was one of the adults that nests here, flew over our heads. And the kids were impressed by it, but the adults were really amazed because, for adults, the bald eagles were on the endangered species list. There was a point where people didn't think they were going to see them anymore. And so all these adults were just completely in awe. They'd never seen one before. It was amazing. And I think that's the nice conservation success story. People can screw up a whole lot of stuff, but when we decided, man, we don't want to lose our national symbol, like we need to do something, we did something, and now the bald eagles have totally come back. And it doesn't matter how many times I see a bald eagle, every time I see it, it practically brings me to tears because it's such a cool, I mean, they're huge, they're majestic, they're all those great things, but it's a good story. So that's another one of those that has made Highbanks really cool to me, is that we've got the nest, we've got babies, not every year, but most years for the last 6 years we've had babies, and you get to tell the story again and again and again.
In addition to the eagle, we could also see the park's famous high riverbanks from our vantage point.
And when they first saw them, there weren't all the trees.
So it was just bare.
So it was very, boom, here it is. Whereas now you kind of have more stuff in the way. We actually tried to recreate one of the original pictures. So we tried to get to the spot. And either we couldn't figure it out or it's just changed so much that it didn't quite have that.
Well, I imagine the shale just erodes a lot.
It does. Yeah, so that's part of it, is that it's constantly.
The brittle shale of the bluffs can also be seen in the river, where it crunches beneath your feet as you walk along the riverbank. It was great to get to tour such a beautiful part of Ohio's natural landscape, and now, the River Bluff area is open to the public. Now, anyone can enjoy its new nature trails and access the river to go canoeing and kayaking. We explored the river and its surroundings a bit more as we meandered our way back to the Nature Center. Now, it was time to explore the waterways that feed into the Olentangy, Highbanks winding streams. Highbanks is home to fascinating geology, where brittle, dark gray Ohio shale is exposed in the bluffs and in the streams. And every so often, you'll find embedded in the shale a strange round object called a concretion. These were likely formed 350 million years ago, when Ohio was still covered by the ocean. As layers of sediment collected around a dead fish or plant, they would eventually form a sphere over hundreds of thousands of years.
I didn't even appreciate until I started working here is the amazing geology of the park. Rocks are never all that exciting, and not to most people anyway. But now that I'm here, it is really cool. Like these round concretions formed from things 350 million years ago. Once you start to really look at the rocks, that's something that I think I didn't appreciate, and I think a lot of people don't appreciate, is just how impressive the geology of the area is.
It's like the history of it.
Sometimes when you're wandering these streams, you'll find a light gray soft rock called Olentangy shale. And with enough time on your hands, you can use it to make some crafts.
Okay, so this is shale?
Yeah, this is Olentangy shale. It's a lighter color than the Ohio shale, which is what you've been seeing mostly, and it's a layer below that. And
It's so soft.
yeah, it's super brittle.
Really easily.
It's got a lot of clay content in it, and actually you can grind it up and sort of moisten it with the water and make some sort of clay figurine, which I think we should do.
We should do that.
The first step is to take the Olentangy shale and grind it into fine particles, all while keeping it wet with the stream water. As you keep grinding it up, your hands might get a little bit messy, but it's nothing that won't wash away with water. After grinding up and squeezing the shale, you can start making little figurines like this turtle. Although what we made here was pretty crude, with a little more time, you can get the shale very fine and create objects like this. Whether you're observing the flora and fauna, learning about the Adena who called this place home, or exploring the river bluffs and streams, Highbanks offers everybody a way to escape from their daily lives and enter a world of natural wonder.
The thing I love the most about Highbanks is that it's not what you expect for Central Ohio. You know, Columbus it's a big city, lots of development, and it's fairly flat. Highbanks is kind of the opposite of all of that. It's this awesome 1,000 acres of forest and woods that are pretty old. You know, you can hike the ravines here, you can hike along the river, you can see the giant trees. Even if you do the same trail every time, you see different stuff every time.
We've been all across the country, backpacking through mountains, canoeing across lakes, and camping beneath the stars. But still, some of our most wonderful experiences out in nature have been here, at Highbanks.
I think people don't realize how many awesome, cool things are right here in Columbus. You don't have to, I mean, it's cool to travel out west, but you can do a weekend hike at Highbanks and see some of the same stuff, so, yeah.
The forests, meadows, and ravines that have been protected here for decades are an oasis of fresh air, wildness, and freedom. And no matter how the landscape changes elsewhere, generations of children will be able to come here to hike, to play, and to learn to love nature.
This park has been around for a little over 40 years. It was established in the early 70s, and back then it was in the middle of nowhere. You know, it was all farmland, it was all fields, whereas now, everywhere you look around here, there's housing developments, there's every restaurant you could possibly imagine. So it's all developed, but then once you get inside the gate, you don't see it, you don't notice it.
The wilderness is a place to let go, to be free of the stresses of modern life. It's a place to learn and to grow, to relax and to unwind. And it's thanks to the preservation of this park that we can all have such a wonderful place so close to home.
Hey, are you gacked? Yeah. Here's your money.